Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Dr. Ram. Today our topic of discussion is functional anatomy of respiratory system. This is the first lecture in the lecture series of the respiratory system. Now let's get into the topic. First, in this chapter, what are all things that we are going to see is about the respiratory epithelium, then about the respiratory zone, then about the cells of the respiratory tract. So, coming into the epithelium of the respiratory system, the epithelium of the various regions in the respiratory system is made up of different epithelium. For example, the trachea and bronchi, they are primarily covered by pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. And coming to the bronchioles, they are made up of cuboidal epithelium. Then coming to the alveoli and alveolar duct, they are made up of simple epithelium, simple squamous epithelium. Out of this, the most important thing is this pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium, because this cilia, whenever it gets damaged or the mucociliary movement is not fine, it is going to lead into various diseases. Let's see what are all the diseases. First, coming to the first disease, clinical importance, which is primary ciliary dyskinesia. What happens in this is the ciliary motility, meaning that is the cilia which has to send the secretions out of the respiratory tract is affected. So, what will happen? The mucociliary clearance of the person will be very much defective. Then there is a clinical syndrome which is associated with this primary ciliary dyskinesia, and it has a classical triad. As we can see a triangle over here. What is this classical triad? The three arms of the classical triad. It is chronic bronchitis, bronchiectasis, then one more important feature, that is situs inversus. Situs inversus means the organ system is completely gone to the right side, the organs are gone to the left, and left side organs are gone to the right. Situs inversus, that is called situs inversus. And one more thing which is seen in this cartilaginous syndrome is, especially in males, it is causing male infertility. Also. It is not in the classical triad, but it is one of the features. Infertility, male infertility is the another feature. Then coming into the second disease, which is cystic fibrosis. In this disease, the difference between primary ciliary kinesia and cystic fibrosis is, in this disease the cilia is completely normal, that is cilia is functioning normally. But what is the issue here? The issue here is the airway respiratory tract is completely blocked with thick secretions. Obviously, if the secretions are thick, the ciliary movement cannot happen properly. So, the motility here, it is reduced because of thick secretion. It is not because of ciliary defective. Ciliary defective is seen in primary ciliary dyskinesia. So, what is a common defect here is, the common defect here is in the chromosome number 7, which is an MCQ chromosome number. And what is the gene affected here? The gene affected here, that is also an MCQ, that is CFTR. What is the CFTR gene? The CFTR gene means cystic fibrosis transmembrane regulator gene. So, this gene is affected. This is one of the important MCQ part, the cystic fibrosis. What is the chromosome number affected? Chromosome number is 7 and the gene is cystic fibrosis. And what is this CFTR gene? This CFTR gene codes for a specific ion channel. That channel is chloride ion channel. So obviously the chloride secretion gets suppressed. Not only the chloride secretion is getting suppressed, in the lumen more and more sodium reabsorption is happening. More and more sodium gets reabsorbed. So when more and more sodium gets reabsorbed, what goes along with it from the lumen? From the lumen, water also is getting reabsorbed. So because of this reabsorb of sodium and the water as well as suppressed secretion of chloride, the mucus become thick as well as sticky. So obviously the mucociliary clearance will be affected. And what is the most common mutation? The most common mutation is at a specific amino acid, that is phenylalanine. This could be one of the potential MCQs for the future, that is phenylalanine. And this phenylalanine is particularly affected at a position, that is position 508. So we have to remember both these things, phenylalanine at 508 position. Both these things are important. And what is the most common infection with regard to this cystic fibrosis? Whenever a person is affected by cystic fibrosis, mucociliary clearance is affected, and it will lead to an infection of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So this is again a potential MCQ. This whole slide is very important, since there are multiple potential new questions that can be asked in cystic fibrosis. It is clinically very important. Now coming to the regions of airflow. This regions of airflow is also called as respiratory zones. This regions of airflow in human, it is divided into upper airway, the conducting airway as well as the alveolar airway. So first thing is upper airway, it comes the nose and the pharynx, then comes the conducting airway where the air is conducted, then alveolar airway. In this airway the gaseous exchange is happening. The difference between a conducting airway and an alveolar airway is, in conducting airway only conduction is happening, no gaseous exchange, whereas in alveolar airway gaseous exchange happens. So there is a specific classification given for this conducting airway and alveolar airway. That classification is called as Weibull's classification, and it is the name of the scientist, Weibull. For example, let's take this is the respiratory tract generation, different generations in the respiratory tract, that is the respiratory tract is dividing, keep on dividing and going inside. The first and foremost generation will be our trachea. Trachea, even though it is not included in Weibull's classification, it is referred as 0, that is zone 0, okay, zone 0 or division 0. Out of this, the first 16, like 1 till 16, there is no gaseous exchange. That is why this zone is called as conducting zone. And whereas the regions 17 to 23, gaseous exchange happens in this region, so that's why this region is called as respiratory zone. So totally we have 23 generations. Out of this, first 16 is conducting zone, 17 to 23 is respiratory zone. Let's see what are all the individual divisions in this conducting zone and respiratory zone. Conducting zone, we know it is first 16. Out of that, it is composed of bronchi and terminal bronchioles. So we have the bronchi, that is 1 to 10, then terminal bronchioles, which is 11 to 16. Then we have the respiratory zone, which is further divided into 3. The respiratory zone is further divided into 3 zones. Respiratory zone. In respiratory zone, we have the respiratory bronchioles. Respiratory bronchioles. What is the division number? The division number is 17, 18, 19. Then we have the alveolar duct, which is 20, 21 and 22. Then finally we have the alveolar sac. This division has potentially many MCQs. For example, where does the conducting zone end? It is classically asked, where does the conducting zone end? Let's see here, it is ending over here, that is the terminal bronchi, which is consisting of 11 to 16 generation. And where does the respiration begin? If the question is, where does the respiration or the gaseous exchange begin? The gaseous exchange begins in the respiratory bronchiole itself. All of us were thinking till now it is only the alveolar duct which alveolar sac which is capable of gaseous exchange, but here we can see that the respiratory zone begins from the respiratory bronchiole, and even in respiratory bronchiole can cause gaseous exchange. How that is possible? Let's see the diagram. Here this respiratory bronchiole has some alveolar buds. This region is called as alveolar bud. Even this alveolar bud can cause gaseous exchange. That is the reason the respiratory bronchioles are also involved in gaseous exchange. Now coming to the respiratory zone MCQ part, all of them are MCQ. The conducting zone ends at terminal bronchioles, and the respiratory zone begins at respiratory bronchioles. Division 0, the bronchi starts from 1, division 0 is given to the trachea, and division 23 it is alveolar sac. We must remember all of them important aspects. Now coming to the cells in the respiratory system, let's see what are all the cells in the respiratory system. The respiratory system cells are divided into conducting zone cells and the alveolar airway cells. The conducting zone cells are multiple in number, and alveolar epithelium we have our classical type 1 and type 2 cells. Let's see what are all the functions of it. Coming to the cells in the conducting airway, they have basal cell, goblet cell, brush cell, club cell or the Clara cell, then neuroepithelial cell. Let's see what are all their functions. The basal cell, it is presented in the near the basement membrane, and it helps to regenerate the other cells. So it acts as a stem cell. This one acts as a stem cell, helps in regeneration of the other cells, regeneration process. Goblet cells, as all of us know, goblet cells all over the body, they are involved in mucus secretion. Then coming to this brush cells, which could be a potential MCQ. This brush cells are primarily involved in sensory chemoreception. This is newly identified, so it is very important. Chemoreceptors, these are primarily sensory chemoreceptors. Then coming to the Clara cells, previously it was referred as Clara cells, now the new name used is club cells. Again it is very important. They produced a protein which is called surfactant stabilizing protein. They don't produce a surfactant, they produce surfactant stabilizing protein. Surfactant stabilizing protein. The surfactant stabilizing protein, especially the type A, B and D, all these three things it is going to produce it. Then coming to this neuroepithelial cells or Klutsky cells, all these two cells, they are primarily whenever there is a mutation in this cell, what happens is we come across with a classical tumor, that is carcinoid tumor. So the end result will be, the mutation of this cell will lead to carcinoid tumors. So here the most important part is the brush cells, which is acting as a sensory chemoreceptor, that we should remember. Now coming into the cells of the alveolar epithelial cells. These cells are called as alveolar epithelial cells, and they are present in alveolar airway. They are primarily divided into type 1 and type 2 cells. Let's see what are all their functions. Here we can see that there is a cell which I am highlighting. This broader cell, it is occupying a large region of surface area. This cell is primarily called as type 1 cell. The other cell, which is a little larger in size but covers a less of surface area, that is called as type 2 alveolar epithelial cell. Okay. Let's see what are the functions. The gaseous exchange is done by the type 1 cell. Of course, as we can see, it is occupying a larger surface area, so it is involved in gaseous exchange. It occupies almost 95% of surface epithelium of the lung alveolar system. What is the reason? Obviously, the main function of lung is gaseous exchange, so it is taking up a larger surface area. Then coming to the second cell type, which is type 2 cell, it produces two important substances. That is a surfactant protein, which is very important. Most of the MCQs are classically asked from surfactant protein, and the second most important protein is alpha 1 antitrypsin. Then it occupies around 5% of the surface epithelium. 95% is by the type 1 cells. Now let's see the functions of alpha 1 antitrypsin and as well as the surfactant protein. Coming to alpha 1 antitrypsin, this alpha 1 antitrypsin, it is a serine protease inhibitor. What it does is, it usually goes and inhibits a substance called neutrophil elastase. It is going to destroy the neutrophil elastase. If it is not destroying this neutrophil elastase, normally what is this neutrophil elastase will do is, it will go and destroy the alveolar epithelium. Once it destroys the alveolar epithelium, what will happen? The elastic nature of the lung goes into damage, and finally it will lead to a disease called as emphysema. And these patients who are having alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency, obviously they will lead to early onset of emphysema, because this neutrophil elastase will keep on destroying the alveolar epithelium. So they can end up in early onset emphysema. This is very important. It is clinically important. Then coming to the most important protein of this entire functional anatomy, that is our surfactant protein. And already, as we have mentioned, it is produced by the type 2 alveolar cell. And what is the substance? That what is it made up of? It is made up of majorly 90% of lipids and just 10% of proteins. This is again an MCQ. This 10% of proteins is made up of, this is again that surfactant protein which we are talking, that is produced by the Clara cells also, but majorly it is produced by the type 2 alveolar cells. That is the surfactant protein. Surfactant stabilizing protein. And all the types are produced here, A, B, C, D. Then out of this 90% lipid, the most common lipid is the phospholipid. The most common phospholipid that is presented, which is a classical MCQ, it is asked in multiple times in various NEET and FMGE question papers, that is DPPC. What is this DPPC? It is nothing but our dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl-choline. This DPPC is very important. Sometimes the option given is different, but it is the other name for DPPC. What is that DPPC's other name? It is nothing but lecithin. So whether the option is given DPPC or lecithin, both are same, and it is the most common phospholipid. It constitutes more than 50% of this 90% lipid of the surfactant protein. So this MCQ is very important. Dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl-choline or lecithin, both are same. So let's see what is the function of this surfactant now. The primary function of surfactant, all of us know that it reduces surface tension. But before going into the how it reduces, before studying its function, let's understand what is surface tension. So suppose if there is an air-water interface, for example, in a beaker, if there is water, this is a water column and above is an air column. So if there is an air-water interface, what is this air-water interface? The junction between this air and water, that is called as air-water interface. They always have a surface tension on it. How? Because the water molecule which is deeper, it is usually pulled in all directions by the neighboring molecules. So what happens is, they don't cause any tension because all sides the forces are same, and it will get neutralized and it is not producing any surface tension. But what happens at the surface level, at the air water interface? Let's see, at the air water interface, Suppose if a molecule is there, do you think any force is acting above? No. So the molecule is pulled this way, the molecule is pulled this way, and the molecule is pulled that way. So no force is there to balance on the upside. So it creates this tension over the air water interface surface. So there is always a tension in this region. The air water interface, there is an always tension, because these water molecules are consistently pulled by its neighbors as well as downward, but no support is from the upside, so it is not getting neutralized. So what will happen is, it will create a surface tension. How does this surfactant reduce this surface tension? Let's see. This surfactant molecule is very intelligent. It has one hydrophilic group, hydrophilic head. This head region is called as hydrophilic head, and it has a tail also. It has a tail region which is this tail region is hydrophobic. It is against water. So what does it do is, it just goes and gets inserted in between these water molecules. Suppose our surfactant molecule is like this. So what it will do is, it will go and get inserted here and breaks the water column. If the water column is broken, obviously the surface tension will reduce. Why we should reduce the surface tension of the lung? The lung alveoli should be kept open, otherwise it has a tendency to get collapsed because of this elastic nature. So what will happen is, this surface tension, by inserting itself in the air water interface, reduces the surface tension to a lot, and it prevents the collapse of the alveoli. Otherwise all of our alveoli will go in for a collapse. So what are the factors affecting? So this is all about our surfactant. Then coming to what are all the factors affecting the surfactant? These factors are very important clinically also, as well as for the MCQ purpose also. The factors which is increasing them, these three substances will help to increase the surfactants in our body, that is glucocorticoids, thyroid hormone, and thyroid releasing hormone. Out of this glucocorticoid is both used in the treatment also, as well as naturally also glucocorticoids are produced, which is increasing the surfactant quantity. Then it is decreased majorly by high insulin level and cigarette smoking. That's why the diseases happen earlier in case of cigarette smokers, because even their surfactant levels are reduced. Then inhalation of 100% oxygen. When 100% oxygen is given, it will create a tension and affect the surfactant production. So let's jump into this scenario where when there is a reduced surfactant. This reduced surfactant is especially seen in newborns which are born prematurely, like premature babies, because for babies it usually takes 32 to 34 weeks for their lung to get maturity, and this surfactant will help a lot in lung maturity. Just in case if a baby is born prematurely, its surfactant level will be very low, and it leads to a increased surface tension. So whenever there is an increased surface tension in the alveoli has an increased tendency to collapse. So whenever this collapse is happening, this syndrome is known as infant respiratory distress syndrome. So in an infant, that the infant is having severe respiratory distress, and it will form hyaline membrane kind of particles in the pathological states. So that's why it is also known as hyaline membrane disease, HMD, hyaline membrane disease. So how can you prevent it? If the baby is born, obviously we can have to treat it, but before the baby is born, is there any way to prevent this? There is one way that we can do, which is the injection dexamethasone, which is a corticosteroid, and we know that corticosteroids increases the surfactant proteins, or the betamethasone to the mother. Actually we are giving it to the mother so that the fetal lung maturity happens and then the delivery can be conducted. Suppose if the baby is born prematurely, then our only option is to give exogenous surfactant directly to the baby. Previously this injection dexamethasone or betamethasone were given in 2 doses, but now Williams says that single dose is sufficient. Single dose of corticosteroids is essentially sufficient for the fetal lung maturity, and then the delivery can be conducted after 24 hours, so that there is some fetal lung maturity is there, and to avoid the infant respiratory distress syndrome. but again if the baby is born, our only option is the exogenous surfactant. I hope it's clear. Thank you.